Today, how are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I wanted to call in primarily about my telephone for my district and my office. This year's telephone book, for some bizarre reason, has my office telephone number printed incorrectly. First time in 18 years. But I'm starting to get calls from people saying they've been trying to reach me, can't reach me because the number for my office was printed incorrectly. And my home number, which is listed in the phone book as well, as Tom Osborne, MHA, they spelled my last name incorrectly. So they're no longer listed together, which makes it very difficult for people to reach me compared to previous years. So I wanted to...
That's unfortunate. That's a real drag because people need to be able to connect with their MHA. So it's unfortunate that you're listed incorrectly. So give people the numbers if they are indeed constituents of yours and they want to talk to you.
Absolutely. Well, my office number is 729-4882, and my constituency line at my home is 722-0796. Now, I'm going to be sending out a letter to each of the households in my district, which is unfortunate because it's a cost that shouldn't have to be bared, but unfortunately, again, I mean, the phone book, without people being able to access their MHA, I'm going to be sending a letter out to each of the, delivered, not Canada Post. We won't put that cost on it, but I'll have those delivered myself, and just informing people of the numbers. And I'm trying to come up with a way. I don't know if it's a fridge magnet or something that people can stick on the wall next to their phone, but to have my numbers handy in the event people need to reach me.
Well, and it's an important feature of what you do, and not because I'm talking to a politician right now, but I know we throw an awful lot of generalized insults at politicians, and people say, make too much, pensions too generous. I think they'd be shocked to know how many phone calls and emails and issues you deal with day to day that are not reflected in the performances or conversations in the House of Assembly. So I think that's fair. Tom, on this front, because I'm talking to another Liberal and this is the way it's going to be, if you want to talk about openness and transparency, and as a former PC, lobbing stones at your former party, and yet we can't get the disclosure from your leadership candidates about who gave them how much money and when during the leadership campaign, what's the right play here?
Well, I think Dwight Ball has spoken to that, and he's indicated that, we will be changing the way leadership campaigns are.
That's all fine. How about the last campaign, though, and the money that was donated at that time?
Well, I mean, I can't speak to that and what should be done regarding those those particular individuals. They operated under a set of rules that were in place. We are promising to change those rules to ensure that in future any leadership candidate for any party would have to disclose. I mean, if you're operating under a certain set of rules now, and people donate money under that set of rules, it's not as cut and dry or as easy as it sounds to just say we're going to disclose everything. That's a discussion I think that has to take place with the individuals that ran. But the leader of our party, Dwight Ball, has indicated very clearly that the rules are going to change, that disclosure will be in place, and that anybody running will know the rules, will operate under those rules, and will have to make full disclosure.
Yeah, speaking for me just personally, that's not good enough for me. So does it also speak to openness and transparency issues when and if, and this is, I think, predictable, that you will go after the Tories on that front, and I think that's legitimate, but is it hard to have it both ways, protect your own information, even if there's an understanding of the contributor? It's no sweat to call someone and say, hey, I'm under pressure to disclose, I'm going to say how much you gave me and when, and who you are. If they say no, then we know that there's a problem there. See, this is where the cynicism continues to grow. So it's going to be really hard to have it both ways on some of this stuff. And I'm not telling you anything you don't know. You know full well what's coming here in the general campaign. So I think this is a tricky road and a tricky issue for the Liberals that could have been much easier because the Tories are ripe for the picking on that particular front, possibly. So anything else you want to say or talk about, even on that front or anything else this morning, Tom?
Well, I mean, I guess while we're on the topic, I did hear earlier, you spoke a little bit about Tory policies, Liberal policies, and so on. I just wanted to point, Dwight Ball and our party have been putting out Liberal policies and ideas at our AGM, we passed 25 policy resolutions, and Dwight Ball is the only leader in our province initiating discussion on policies.
That's not
thorough
true.
discussion on policy.
Well, that's not true. And plus, the things passed at the Liberal Convention, no, with all due respect, there's no policy in that. There's suggestions of things that may be adopted. There's nothing costed. There's no specifics. There's no actual timeline. So it's not policy. It's just like what Mr. Kent sent out about the securing our energy future. It's broad strokes, and sometimes that's simply not good enough. And I think we're approaching a time in the province's history where we can't accept this from our political parties and or their representatives as candidates. None of the policies have any meat on the bone, and I think that's a fair characterization.
No, I don't think. Let me speak about some policies specifically, but I will say, we're probably 12 months away from an election. We will have a policy booklet that is very detailed and ready to, in front of the people of the province. But, let's talk about some of the policies that Dwight Ball has come out with. We've indicated, for example, we'll repeal Bill 29. We've been very specific on what that will contain. We came out with, and this is a prime example, we came out with a Premier's Forum. Dwight has indicated that he'll have a Premier's Forum, engage municipal leaders around the province, meet with them on an annual basis, talk about everything from fiscal framework, very detailed, municipal operating grants, sustainability, capital works requirements, multi-year capital funding. He was very detailed in that policy. One of the leadership candidates for the PC party then announced the same policy. So if you announce detailed policy too early, the other parties will claim it as their own policy.
Yeah, and I understand the co-opting of policy, but once again, that's not a policy that really, the whole bit I'm listening. If politicians aren't listening, then they shouldn't be running, and there's no one fit to govern if you're not listening. So an extensive list of public consultations, for me, is not policy. To me, that means that you're not ready to hit the ground running. And is that not a fair characterization?
Yeah, it's not fair, Paddy. Let me talk about a couple of others. We've had, I think Dwight has come out with over 20 policy initiatives already. MHA pension reform, very detailed on that policy. He talked about voting age electoral reform. He was detailed on that. Talked about the comprehensive energy plan.
Let's take one at a time, though, just so we can actually talk about it. So you say there was detailed information on... I was trying to keep up with everything you said. Electoral reform, is that one of the ones you just said? Just give me that list again.
About voting age.
Okay, voting age, yeah, fair enough.
Voting age to 16.
Yeah.
Electoral reform, ensure that electoral reform is automatic every 10 years. Will happen in 2015. He indicated very clearly some policy initiatives in that regard. The comprehensive energy plan, we talked about including all forms of energy, not just hydro from Muskrat Falls. Mm-hmm. We talked about, instead of just giving a monopoly to Nalcor, as Bill 61 did, encouraging the development of wind power and natural gas, focusing on conservation initiatives.
Conservation is good. That kind of stuff is interesting. But the removal of 1661, which I think is important to discuss and probably the right thing to do, it does make it tricky, knowing that we're already on the hook as ratepayers to repay that entire $5 billion plus interest. So the implementation of any other private sector and or public sector power, that's going to be tricky to do. That's going to be a big handful, isn't it?
Well,
energy pay the bills.
Yeah, you do, absolutely. And this is the unfortunate part about, the I guess, part of the noose of Muskrat Falls. But, we are talking about policy and how comprehensive the policies that our leader, Dwight Ball, has put out. And, the comprehensive energy plan, and again, focusing on conservation initiatives, very detailed.
Does that come in the form of subsidies, or is this just, trying to convince people with awareness plans? Because, there's two different things when it comes to conservation. Either you subsidize people to, invest in better windows and insulation, that kind of stuff. Or how do you approach conservation? Because I think that's interesting and also been very tricky. It's proven to be tricky for provincial and federal governments.
I talked about in great detail, based on our party's focus in the House of Assembly on the conservation initiatives that we would look at. And we would take best practices from other provinces. You look at Nova Scotia, just, right next door to us, for example. They've got rebates on energy conservation initiatives. You put in conservation and energy conservation windows, there's a rebate. There are several initiatives in Nova Scotia. There are several initiatives in other provinces. We don't have those initiatives here. We don't have smart metering here. We don't have, in this province, for example, if you set your timer on your dishwasher or on your dryer to turn that on at 3 o'clock in the morning, you get a better rate because you're using energy, not peak hours. So those are the types of things that we're talking about. Another policy, we looked at the Independent Appointments Commission, very detailed on that. Dwight had indicated that members of that commission would make recommendations to Cabinet instead of appointments being partisan. And you look at government from 2012 to 2013, the PC government made 46 senior appointments. Many of those were partisan. So we need to make sure that,
Are you saying that's going to go away? Patronage stops under a new Liberal government? Really?
Dwight Ball has indicated very clearly as one of his policies that an independent appointments commission would be put in place and that members of that commission would make a recommendation to Cabinet for candidates for senior appointments, and those recommendations would be based on merit and based on qualifications instead of based on partisan affiliation.
Yeah, the best way to do that is competition for the jobs. I mean, it's all fine to have recommendations put forward, and I understand that, and that sounds like a fairly pragmatic approach, but we have competitions for all the other jobs. They should be the same thing for what is currently political appointments. Tom, I tell you, we're way over time, and I'm getting flagged here to get off to the break, but I'll let you summarize, sir, because I am enjoying the conversation, and I think it's important.
Well, I mean, we've had over 20 policy initiatives laid out. Those are just some of them. The healthcare strategy that Dwight very clearly articulated is another. He indicated the Family Violence Intervention Court, putting that back in place, at the elimination of the zero evaluation policy for schools. There are several policies he's come out with. So I'd like to call back again at some point and talk further, in further detail on these policies, because they are comprehensive.
I tell you, let's do this, and I'm happy to do exactly that, because that's all that's important to me. The political party that wins, I couldn't care less. It's the policies put forward that we can debate and discuss and absorb and see if we can make real legitimate policy. Next time we do, let's exchange an email or something, come up with 2 or 3 so that we stay focused and we really get down into the weeds and talk about what is concrete and or not and costed out and or not, because I think that's critical issues for the people listening to these shows. I appreciate that, Tom, and I really enjoyed the conversation.
I appreciate the opportunity as well, Paddy. Thank you very much.
Stay in touch.
Thanks.